12. But if you see student enrollment is that black line, it's only risen by 8%. The number of teachers is the blue. And in that teaching number, teaching staff, they include teachers' aides a lot of times if they're certified in a specific way. So the red line is non-teaching staff. So what happens is you have actually less money going to things like teachers, classroom activities, than you do for these non-teaching things like administrative staff. And I don't know, I keep wanting to switch the slides on my thing. Next slide. So I don't know about Iowa, but I'm from Indiana, and this is, if you see in 2006, our office, the superintendent's office, had a budget of about $76 million, which is really too big anyway. Executive administration, so that's administration of the schools at an executive level under the office of the superintendent. Then you have the principal's office, administration. And look at that. Now here comes the stimulus. Whoa, look at the office of the superintendent. She's been paid, okay? Her office is getting more money. And why does that happen? Well, because she is administering a lot of things, a lot of programs that were conditioned upon that money, okay? So they're paying her to administer more programs. Now, student achievement, which is down at the bottom, that also went up. But look, it had to go down, right? Because the federal funding runs out. But who doesn't lose their funding? Well, those are the adults, right? Their money even went up, except for executive administration, it went down a little bit. But all these people are continuing to grow their offices and grow their funding, but the students, well, we can knock that back down. See, the focus is not on the children, the focus is on the adults. The focus is on the administrative aspects of education. Okay, next slide. Oh. I just like this picture. So what do we have after all this? Well, it's not working, right? Students, a lot of times in public schools and in some private schools, they look about like that. So after all this time, all this money, it isn't really working. Next slide. So the same idiots in DC that have given us the programs that have not been working decided that there's a crisis in education and we're going to have to double down and put more federal control over the situation. And so they came up with the Common Core Standards. It's part of a larger initiative that includes assessments, standards, changing teacher evaluation systems, school accountability systems, really an overhaul of your entire education system guided by federal regulations. And to sort of sweet talk people into it, what they did is they said, oh, the Common Core Standards are just going to be wonderful. They're going to be fewer, clearer, and deeper, and they're going to be much more rigorous than what your state had before. They're going to be internationally benchmarked to high-performing countries so that we can compete on a global level. And yeah, preparing students, our students are very, very low internationally. They can't compete on the same stage, and the Common Core Standards, they're going to solve all of that. Well, today I'm going to show you how every single one of these claims is false. And it's not even hard to prove that they're false. I mean, there really was no evidence supporting their claims. On the other hand, there was a lot of evidence showing that their claims are false. Okay, next slide. So Iowa has been implementing the Common Core at a slower rate than other states have done. Indiana, we adopted it in 2010. It's been implemented there really ever since that time. So most states have been using Common Core in the grade schools and the high schools for about 4 years now. So after 4 years, what do we have to show for that? Next. Well, if you've been reading the news, the SAT scores came in for those that took it in 2015, and they are the lowest SAT scores in a decade. So last year, or in the earlier part of this year, those students, most of whom have been under Common Core for most of their high school careers, are scoring 7 points lower, and that's a lot. It's the first time we've had such a dramatic drop in SAT scores. Okay, next slide. Next slide, please. think I put her to sleep already. Just kidding. So there's also another thing we can use to gauge how is Common Core working nationally. Well, there's something called NAEP. It's the National Assessment of Education Progress. And it is a test that is actually required by Congress and is administered to kids in grades 4 and grades 8 every 2 years in math and in English. And this year's reports came in, and in math, both 4th and 8th grade students are scoring lower in mathematics than in 2013. They're scoring lower in 8th grade mathematics than in 2013, and the scores in 4th grade reading were stagnant. Now, this is really a very significant thing, because this is the first time that these scores have dropped in 25 years. So, you know, if you're an official, if you're on a school board, if you're a teacher, these numbers need to mean something to you. And if you're in Iowa and you're still bordering about Common Core, or you have a chance to get out of it, you know, you have the advantage of other states' experience to look at. And you can say, you know what, this thing isn't working nationally. Our scores are, scores are going down. Why would Iowa follow that? Next slide. So when the people came up with Common Core, what they didn't do is they didn't look at what works. You know, if you're going to do national standards, which I'm opposed to, but if you were not against the idea of that, why wouldn't you look at what works? Next slide. And there are some proven models that they could have looked at, but were absolutely ignored. So Massachusetts, a lot of people point to that. It is a state with has very high-performing level of student achievement. SATs, they are the #1 state 10 years in a row. On NAEP, they score at the top in both grades and in both subjects every single year, okay? You can look at high-performing Asian countries like Singapore, who is near the top on a test called TIMSS. And TIMSS is interesting. It's like NAEP, but they do it internationally. So all the different countries through the OECD, they administer this test to a certain, percentage of their population so that we can compare countries in math. And I think they have it in English and in science. But no, I'm sorry, TIMSS is only in science and math. Okay, next slide. So in 2011, it's only given every 3 years. So 2011 is the most recent scores that have been released. They're about to release the ones in 2015 here soon. But if you look at it, oh, that red doesn't show up that well. But Massachusetts decided they wanted to enter as their own country so they could see how they compared internationally. And look at that. I mean, Massachusetts is #5 in the world, tied with Japan. Okay, so we have some states with some pretty good models that they could have used with Common Core that Iowa going forward could use, but they didn't. And then you look, #9 is the United States. Now, I don't know about you, but when they were pitching Common Core, all we heard was how America's falling internationally and our students do not compare well. And we're like number 36 in math. And I'm thinking, what are they talking about? These are scores for 8th grade. And I don't know, maybe it's at an older level, the data that they're using, but Common Core really affects K through 8 in high school. So it's a little confusing, but you get that a lot by groups that are pushing something like Common Core. They a lot of times use the myths in order to further their own, desired education policy type ideas. So, okay, next slide. So when you look at countries like Massachusetts, states like Massachusetts are high-performing countries, there are some consistent factors that they all share. Those are the things that you as a state and the people at Common Core should be looking at. Now, these things are direct instruction. They sequence topics coherently. It's not all different kinds of things taught in one grade. They're structured very well. Memorization of math facts in the early grades, use and practice of the standard algorithm early and consistently, and they don't really focus on higher order skills in the younger kids, right? They're not trying to teach algebra to 2nd graders, and that's because 2nd graders are not developmentally ready to do that type of abstract thinking. I mean, have you ever asked someone who's 6 or 7 or 8 years old, like, why? Well, they can never really think about their thinking because they think very concretely. It's like a child telling time. Well, they can tell time on their watch. It's 3 o'clock. There's actually, my sister is a child clinical psychologist, and this is her example, so I have to give her credit. But she's like, it's like teaching the child the concept of time, right? If you say to your son, go outside, and when it's 5 o'clock, I want you to come in for dinner. Well, if they have a watch on and they can read their watch at 5 o'clock, then they know, oh, it's 5 o'clock. If they're taught well enough to know to look at their watch and consult it. But if the watch breaks, it can get dark, they keep playing, and they have no concept that it's about that amount of time that's taken place, right? Because they can't conceptually think about time, right? So kids don't really think that way when they're younger. They think in more concrete terms. Okay, next slide. We can skip this, go ahead. Direct instruction is basically teacher has the knowledge, teacher imparts that knowledge to the students, students practice that knowledge. Common Core, through their process standards, is sort of like wants the teacher to be the guide on the side, not the sage on the stage, meaning kids discover their own learning, they discover their own meeting, children work in groups and come up with different strategies and ways of solving things. Now that might work well at the high school level, but when children are little, they need to be told how to do things, right? It's a more efficient way of teaching children. This is interesting. So this is when I was talking about how they sequence things in a sort of a sequential manner. So Common Core is the gray, and high-performing TIMSS countries, that's in the red. So if you look in first and second grade, they focus on 3 topics. Common Core, on the other hand, concentrates on a lot of different topics, right? So in high-performing countries in Massachusetts, they focus on the fundamentals in the younger grades. They don't bother with doing algebra. What's the point? If a kid does not know math facts and how to do, say, 2-digit addition, why would you bother teaching them about the associative property or, or all these different types of algebraic ideas? First of all, they're not really ready to learn that, and it takes a lot of time out of the classroom to do that, right? If they just wait until they're a little older and they've mastered the fundamentals, they learn that much more quickly in a much easier way. Next slide. So for those of you who don't know the standard algorithm, just a refresher, that's the standard algorithm for addition and subtraction, right? You line it up in numbers and you borrow and you carry. Well, in Common Core, this is not required until the 4th grade. Okay, so next slide. So at Massachusetts, they have to know all their addition subtraction facts from numbers 0 to 9, and they have to demonstrate in the classroom an understanding and the ability to use the conventional algorithms for addition, 2 3-digit numbers, 3 2-digit numbers, and subtraction, right? So in Massachusetts, they're doing it. They actually banned their 1st and 2nd grade. I'm talking pre-Common Core Massachusetts standards. They banded 1st and 2nd grade together because children develop at different rates, so I thought that is also something people can take. Next slide. Singapore, same thing. Addition and subtraction using formal algorithms. So they're an English-speaking country, but that's what they call like the standard algorithm or formal algorithms, same thing. Next slide. Here's the Common Core standards for addition and subtraction in grade 1. And if you look at one thing, look how long they are, okay? And they'll say, oh, these are just general guidelines. And, teachers and schools, they can go beyond and they can do whatever they want. They're just general guidelines. They're not telling teachers how to teach. But if it were a general guideline, here, go down to the next slide. It's a little easier to see. So here's one of those standards laid out. If it was a general guideline, it'd stop after the yellow, right? Add and subtract within 20. Demonstrating fluency for addition and subtraction within 10. But it doesn't stop there. It goes on, using strategies, such as count on, making a 10, they give examples, decomposing in numbers, using the relationship between addition and subtraction, and creating equivalent but easier or known sums. Well, I'm going to show you what these mean. So when people say Common Core doesn't tell teachers how to teach, it does, and it's in the standards. So what I'm going to show you is those standards that are written there, what they will require from a teacher. It's not a teacher poorly implementing the lesson. It's not a teacher not understanding what is required of Common Core. It is the Common Core. So, okay, next slide. So this is the count on method, and it seems like something appropriate for kindergarten, when kids are learning. So you say, if it's 6 plus 5, you put the bigger number in your head and you say it's 6, and then you hold up the smaller number in your other hand and you say 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. When all the fingers are gone, then that's your sum. And that's fine when kids are little, right? Kids need to understand what they're doing. But this is something that they're continuing into second grade under Common Core. Now look at Massachusetts and Singapore. They're not doing this anymore. They're not doing this past a kindergarten level. And if they are doing it, they're teaching it with a standard algorithm next to it, right? So that they can understand the concept. They teach the concept in order to better know and understand the algorithm, okay? So next one. So this is a good one. So this is about using addition to understand subtraction. And what they do here is you have 32 minus 12. That's going to be a hard one. So what do? Well, the teacher is explaining to have the student add numbers to the smaller one until they get the first number, right? So they're going to add 3 to 12, 15. That's not 32. Add 5 more. There's 20. And they keep adding until they get to 32. And then you add up all the numbers you had to put together, and it's 20. So your answer is 20. Now, if you look, okay, there's so many chances for error, right? How many more steps does this take? How many more chances does the child have to get that wrong? This doesn't make any sense, and it's not efficient at all. Okay, next disastrous math one. Uh-oh. Oh, this is the best part. So there's that, and then there's like the decomposing method. And what that is you take, let's say it was 32 minus 12. Well, they'd say subtract the tens first, and then subtract the ones, and then you put them together, right? It's about breaking down the numbers to make it easier. Right, skip that one. Just go down to the one that's in yellow, that's highlighted. Okay, perfect. So that's what they're doing, first grade, second grade, even a little into third grade. And in third grade, they switch it, but they never mention the standard algorithm, the lining up in the columns. So here's third grade. What are we going to do differently? Well, we're going to fluently add and subtract within 1,000 using strategies and algorithms, not the standard algorithm, right? That means different things. If it doesn't say the standard algorithm, the education establishment turns that into a multitude of different types of algorithms, which I'll show you. But have to be based on place value, properties of operations, and the relationship between addition and subtraction. Pretty much the same as first and second grade, it's just a little different. Next slide. So this is the relationship between addition and subtraction, and it's also known as the compensation method. So what they do here is they take 288 plus 574. That's hard. These methods are really a way so that kids never have to borrow or carry, because that's confusing to kids, so they want to take that whole thing out of it. So what they'll do is add 2 to the top. If I add 2 to the top, I have to take away 2 from the bottom. And now I'm at 290 and 572. But that's not it. They call them friendly numbers. Find a friendly number that's easy to add. Well, those aren't friendly enough. Add 10 to it, you get 300. Take away 10 from the bottom, that's 562. Well, those are nice, friendly numbers that I can do, because guess what? I don't have to borrow and I don't have to carry anymore. So now my number is 862. Next slide. This is a place value strategy, and it looks kind of like the standard algorithm. This is a standard algorithmic approach. And what they do is they start adding, but they start in the hundreds, so they start on the left, right? So you add your hundreds first, then you add the tens, the 9 and 7, and then you add the ones, and then you add those 3 together. Now, students starting on the left is a big problem, because when you go to teach them the standard algorithm, guess what? You don't start on the left, you start on the right. And this was my first experience with Common Core. This is years ago. My son was in third grade, actually at a small Catholic private school in Indianapolis. And like an earlier speaker who was talking about school choice, we have a really bad school choice program. And they require any school that gets a voucher to take the state assessment. We had just adopted Common Core that year. We were going to have the park assessment. And so they were changing all the curriculum so that it would align to the state assessment, because it was going to be used in the school accountability system for the state. So anyway, but when I tried to show my son the right way, it was like a bad habit, right? I had to smack his hand. Don't start on the left, start on the right. So you see, these things don't seem bad, but what they do is they teach them very inefficient, and they teach them bad habits, right? So when they go to learn the more efficient way that will take them into higher level mathematics, you know, they've formed bad habits. Next one. So this is just another method. It's based on place value strategy. Add the tens, add the ones, add them together. It's a nightmare. Am I running out of time? Okay, next slide. this is the point. What happens when they get harder? How are you going to do those using the compensation method? How do you do it when you add decimals? What about when you have to start doing fractions? These methods don't work. They spend 3 years leading up to it. And go to the next slide and I'll be done. So this is from the actual writers of the Common Core Math Standards. They wrote this book. It's called Progressions in Mathematics, to explain to teachers what they want done. And they say, the standards distinguish between strategies from algorithms. For example, students use strategies for addition and subtraction grades K through 3 that are expected to learn to fluently add and subtract whole numbers using the standard algorithm by the end of 4th grade. So use of the standard algorithms is viewed as the culmination of a long progression of reasoning about quantity, space, tens, properties of operations. So this is what the Common Core does. And so when people say it doesn't tell teachers how to teach and they're just simply guidelines, it does not. And candidates who come to Iowa need to understand this. Do they think Common Core is a good idea if it was state-led? You know, is this the kind of thing that they support? All right, well, there's more, but I will stop there because I'm sure you're all hungry. I hope you haven't lost your appetite and you still want to eat. Thank you so much.
You'll be free to ask Erin any questions during lunch. Lunch will be right outside the door and to your left. One of the only times we're going to encourage